So today I'll be talking about ontological cheating and basically saying it's okay. Don't worry if you don't know what that term means. I'll get through it all. And we're specifically going to see how it helps with presentism, but it's basically going to show us how we talk about unreal objects, including patently fictional objects, and how we can get some truth out of that. So here's a quick overview. I'm first going to answer a couple of key questions, which is going to clarify everything. Then I'm going to talk about presentism. Then the grounding objection, which is what we're trying to solve here with ontological cheating. And then I'm going to run through how ontological cheating works for presentism here. So, quick overview. What is ontological cheating? It's basically getting truth without truth makers, without real truth makers, which might sound a bit fishy. So, is anything like regular cheating? No. The regular variant, the risk is pretty high, right? The reward is questionable. The ontological variant, no risk, high reward, at least that's what I'm going to argue for. And the good thing for philosophers is that in the ontological variant, you don't need, at the very least, two people who like you. You don't even need them to exist at all. So that's going to be very good for philosophers. So why wouldn't you ontologically cheat if this is the picture? Primarily for the grounding principle of truth, and that says that truth supervenes on being, real being, which means that, well, truth without real truth makers is cheating, right? It's in the name. Ontological cheating is usually used as like an accusation rather than something you defend. So what's the crack with presentism and fictional objects then? Well, presentists have trouble speaking about dinosaurs, among other things, about past objects, about non-present objects. And philosophers have problems talking to people. So how can we get it so that presentists can talk like real people and analyze like philosophers as well to get some truth out of claims about dinosaurs, even though these dinosaurs are not going to exist. They're not going to be part of the ontology for a presentist. So the way I'm going to run through this is presentism. I'm going to show that presentism supposedly fails to make sense of this talk. I'm going to show that the standard solutions don't really give us what we want out of presentism, which is something that's simple and intuitive. And then I'm going to propose my ontological cheating. My specific version is going to be having the truth of a statement being grounded by the aboutness. So what a statement is about, we'll see what that means exactly later. And this is going to help us deal with all sorts of non-existent objects. So here's a tie-in with fictional objects. Right, so we'll start with presentism. Why might ontological cheating help presentism? And what should this presentism look like for ontological cheating to help? I'm actually going to start with the second bit of that. So what is presentism? What should it look like? So presentism, most simply, is an ontological thesis. So it's about what does and does not exist. And unsurprisingly, it's going to say that only the present exists. So we'll take a quote here from Ned Marcosian. This is really going to spell out what presentism is, more or less. So he says, if you see here, there's this little thing he's written on the whiteboard. If we really zoom in, I promise that what actually it says here is this quote. If we're to make an accurate list of all the things that exist, i.e. a list of all the things that our most unrestricted quantifiers range over, there would not be a single non-present object on the list. So the way he looks at it is we're, tabulating, adding up all the things that exist in the universe. There's a bottle right in front of me. There's a lamp right in front of me. We're adding all this stuff together. And he's going to say, if we do that, we're not going to find dinosaurs, at least not living ones. We're not going to find, alien outposts in the future. None of that. It's going to be just the everyday stuff around us and the present everyday stuff. If we look at it this way, we have this timeline from past to present to future even, right? So Ned Marcosian uses the example of Socrates and of his future grandchildren and the Taj Mahal, right? So the eternalist is going to believe that all of this coexists equally, right? The only reason we give any priority to the stuff in the middle here is because we think, we live in the present kind of thing, but Socrates lived in his own present. So it's the same way that I'm in Glasgow right now, and a lot of you guys are in Yekaterinburg, and some of you guys will be elsewhere. So the presentist is going to say, hold on, no. There's a privileged moment here, the exact present. It has the Taj Mahal and it has Ned Markosian. Not this picture quite yet because that's in the past. So, but wherever Ned Markosian is at the moment. So now Ned Markosian would say there is no Socrates, there is no future grandchildren in his view of the world, his complete view of the world, unrestricted quantifiers, right? Of course, presentists want to say that during Aristotle's time or during Socrates' time, so specifically Valentine's Day, 399 BC, right, the day right before Socrates was put to death, well, the world included a living Socrates, but did not include a Taj Mahal or a Ned Markosian or Ned Markosian's future grandchildren even. Importantly then, the presentist ontology has to be dynamic. It has to switch from moment to moment. Every single instance, you have a different present with a different ontology, a different unrestricted quantifier range. I didn't bother to animate the little red bits, which are the present bits. That would have taken ages. So we can quite clearly see presentism's benefits, I hope, which is it's simple and intuitive. Even a lot of non-presentists agree that it is the most simple and intuitive ontology of time. You basically have almost nothing in your ontology. I mean, you get rid of possibly an infinite amount of things, right? Every tiny time slice, future time slice of me, my future grandchildren, all sorts of things, till time, goes on and might go on infinitely. And you have the same thing all the way back until the Big Bang that are just completely taken out of your ontology. It also is quite intuitive, right? Dinosaurs did exist, but they do no longer. I think a lot of people believe that. And it gives us this present moment privileged quality that's also dynamic. We'd like to think, at least we live in this way, that it seems we're living in the present, but that the present is catching up with us, right? So the problem is presentism also has a lot of problems, right? For similar reasons to why it gets its simplicity and intuitiveness. A lot of philosophers don't think quantitative parsimony, so that's parsimony in terms of just the number of objects, right? If I have 3 bottles in front of me and another philosopher says, no, there are 2 bottles in front of you, that's going to be quantitative parsimony. And following Lewis, a lot of people don't really care about quantitative parsimony. They think, okay, if you can accept 1 bottle, then why not accept as many bottles as you need to, say as much stuff as you want. And then another reason is we're going to see that philosophers, presentists can't talk about dinosaurs in a nice way, ground their truth if they're going to believe like this. And finally, there's a really big worry about, what is the present? How thick is it? How thin is it? And that's going to get into special relativity issues. I've dealt with all of these in the past, but I'm only going to deal with this middle one really for today. So the middle one is what we call the grounding objection. Essentially, we're going to see that presentists, if they want to talk about any of this, dinosaurs, Socrates, they're going to have to say some weird things about dinosaurs. So the grounding objection goes like this. A statement's truth is grounded in, or it's analyzed in terms of its real existing reference. That's pretty intuitive, right? If I talk about anything, the way I'm going to find out if what I'm saying is true is I'm going to look out there in the world. If I say that chair is blue, I'm going to look at that chair. Is there an actual chair really out there in the world that is blue? Yes, then I said something true. If not, if it's a chair in a fictional book or, a chair in my mind, that doesn't quite work, right? I'm not saying something that's true. The second bit is presentism denies any real existing past reference. I mean, this seems obvious. It seems to be the definition of presentism, right? And the third bit is that, it seems that when I make statements about the past, I'm talking about the past. So it's going to be with reference to real existing past reference. The same way that if I talk about the chair in front of me that you guys can't see, it's going to be, my statements about them are going to be about that chair and nothing else. So what we get out of these 3 statements is that under presentism, there can't be any past truth, right? Because there are no past objects, no past real objects. Here I've laid it out in terms of sort of headlines for the different premises. So truth being supervenience, then we just essentially presentism. But if you want to try with a presentism that doesn't do that, we can call it ontological exclusion of the past, whatever you want. And then the sort of past propositions are about the past. Problem is, I think at least objectively, dinosaurs are really cool, or at least they were really cool in the past. The living ones, not just the fossils. we want to say that that's objectively true. Obviously, if you disagree here, you might pick another objective truth, right? The Battle of Hastings happened in 1066. That seems rather uncontroversial. It did happen. We have so much evidence for it. And it's not the evidence that makes it true that we have today. It's the fact that there was actually a Battle of Hastings that happened. That's going to be what makes it true. So if we take a time machine here, back into the past, to when I was talking about presentist ontology, I've now swapped out Socrates with a dinosaur here. This is the current presentist ontology, right? More or less. Problem is, if Ned Marcosian here says dinosaurs are or were really cool, in the sense when he's talking about dinosaurs, that he's talking about past living dinosaurs, then it seems like he's lying, right? That's completely false. Why? Well, because there are no dinosaurs. You know, if I say fairies are cool, then if by any chance when I'm saying fairies are cool, I mean there are real fairies out there that are really cool, then we'd want to say I'm lying, right? We'd want to say this is false. Let's go back into where we were, go back to the present. We have this grounding objection. It seems that we're going to have to get rid of one of these premises to make it work, or we're going to have to accept this strange conclusion that the past is false, or is not truth apt in some way, at least sort of not substantially, non-trivially so. So how can we actually do this? There are a bunch of different strategies. Lucretianism or Hesiod's strategies, they're very, very similar, is going to essentially say that there's some property or some thisness of the world that the world presently has that either says, encodes past states, you know, it's a property of having contained cool dinosaurs, or it's this unexemplified property. So when Socrates was alive, there was Socraticity, which explains sort of who he was. And the sort of Hesiod's approach is to go, even when Socrates died, the Hesiodium, the thisness, just continued to exist and exist presently in the world. So you can talk about them, and that's how we, you know, think about these past statements. There's a lot at issue here. Obviously, we're adding now some stuff to our ontology, and we just said that presentism is good because it gets rid of a lot of stuff. These things seem like qualitative differences, right? These are very strange abstract properties and entities. If they're not abstract, they're even stranger, right? What do we make? How can we make sense of a past-related, current, present property, right? Especially given presentism, where the past doesn't exist compared to when you're in the present. That makes no sense, right? Also, truth about the past, like we said, or about the past, right? When I say dinosaurs are cool, I'm not making reference to any, you know, Hesiod that's encoding the past state of the world. I'm talking about actual dinosaurs out there in the past, right? But crucially, that I don't think exist anymore. So this seems to contradict simplicity and intuition. It seems to contradict the whole past propositions about the past statement that we want to have true. Ersatzicism is the next strategy. It's saying that there's an abstract manifold of real, albeit completely abstract, non-present times. You know, same way mathematical numbers might be abstract. You're going to have non-present times being abstract. This is really strange, right? They're past living dinosaurs, but they exist, and they really exist for the presentist, including they exist sort of now, or I guess timelessly, but they're abstract. That's very weird. How can we have past but timeless existence, abstract things in a completely present world? It seems very strange. Also, again, is this really sort of fixing our worries? Is this really grounding these statements? Dinosaurs are, or dinosaurs were cool, are statements about concrete dinosaurs. They're not statements about abstract ones. I think either way, if you're taking ersatzicism seriously, it seems like you're just not taking presentism seriously, right? That's just not a presentist thesis at the end of the day. The last sort of response is fictionalism. It's biting the bullet. It's saying, yeah, sure, there are no dinosaurs. I'm going to be a good philosopher about this. I'm going to believe in truth supervening on being. And I'm going to say, yeah, that means that we cannot say anything non-trivially true about dinosaurs. Marcosian specifically is going to opt for more sort of a modal interpretation of this, which makes it slightly more believable, but I still think wrong and sort of damaging for simplicity and intuitiveness. So he's going to say dinosaurs were cool, you know, that's strictly speaking, that's false, right? Because they're fictional. He's going to specifically say that we should think of it the same way we think about possibility. It's not actual, but there's some truth we can get out of it. But, you know, maybe this isn't strictly speaking true. Obviously, I think this is completely against our intuition, right? There's something different about truths about the past than, say, truths about, Sherlock Holmes. Did he live on Baker Street? Yes, in a sense, because the author, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote that, but not in the same way that the Battle of Hastings happened. And it might even get rid of simplicity, right? It might offend simplicity by saying, no, everyone's wrong when they talk about the past. That needs an error there, a pretty substantial one. So how do we deal with it? We're going to have to say that dinosaurs are cool because that's true. It's objectively true, right? It's not because of strange existing properties. It's not because of abstract dinosaurs frolicking in abstract manifolds. It's because they're real dinosaurs which inhabited real worlds and which were cool. Note the past tense here, right? This is about taking tense and implied tense in the are cool sense seriously. But big issue, right? We have truths of being, and can we really be said to be taking our ontology seriously if we're saying, oh no, these dinosaurs, they're not really included in our ontology, but let's range over them anyway. Let's talk about past existence of them. Well, truths of being at the very least, that's pretty uncontroversial. Can we add past no longer existing being, perhaps? Can we add future yet to exist being? Well, we should note that just truth being supervening on being only isn't actually that intuitive. Let's take the example of lax, non-existence. If Denmark Cuisine says fairies don't exist, that seems to be just the unvarnished truth, right? And yet it's not making any reference to fairies. And specifically, we don't take that to be adding anything to our ontology either. We don't need to believe in the lack of fairies as a part of ontology. We can just see that it's not in there, right? So truth supervenes on being, the very least on non-being as well. And so maybe on past no longer existing being, maybe on future yet to exist being. Right. Why should we accept that we can add these two last bits? Well, why could we add the first bit, right? Non-being seems pretty arbitrary to restrict it. And also just, there's a good methodology here. It's going to allow us to have a vastly reduced ontology. And it's going to conform to some intuitions that the past was real, but that it no longer exists. So capture that sort of strange sense of, yes, was concrete, did very much exist, but also not part of our ontology. Simple and intuitive, right? Not quite, because that's all this principle of truth supervening on being, non-being, no longer existing being, etc., seems to be very much more complicated, at least sort of ideologically, than truth supervening on being and non-being. And are we taking ontology / existence seriously? Like this four-dimensional worm here, this eternalist, is going to say, hold on, you're equivocating. We have no longer existing being and yet to exist being. We just call that, existence in the future and in the past. And we just define in the future and the past in terms of, where you are in the 4D world. You can't just have no longer existing being, but deny that it's a type of being, it's a type of existence that we should include in our ontology. So how do we actually do this then? First, to show you that it's not against ideological simplicity, that third thesis you see right there, the truth of a statement depends on what the statement is about. That's the one I'm going to endorse. As you can see, that's actually a lot simpler than the two other theses, the truth supervening on being and the sort of more complicated one that it looked like we were going to have to endorse. So looks like we've got our simplicity there. To explain sort of this aboutness, basically the meaning of a sentence is what gives you the truth conditions. So let's take these two chairs. Let's say they're present chairs, right? So the eternalist and the presentist are both going to say there's a lot of truth to be gotten from them, and very easily so. The general rule is that this is about being, it's about presently existing being to figure out the chairs. But notice that specifically, there's going to be statements about this chair and statements about that chair, and they're going to be different, and the truth conditions are going to be different. So that shows you that which one you're picking out specifically is going to matter in the sentence. What I want to say basically is that's going to matter all the time. If I'm talking about non-existent things, then it's going to be with reference to those non-existent things, even if they're completely non-existent, which is how we figure out our the truth of them. More so, to even get truth supervenes on being, why would we have truth supervenes on being? Well, because truth supervenes on what a statement is about. It just so happens that a lot of statements are about presently existing being. Still, we've got the equivocation stance. And I'm going to say to the equivocation stance, hold on. What the eternalist is saying is essentially like, you can't have this no longer existing being, but not have it in your ontology. That's essentially saying the world is the four-dimensional one, where everything has to stay in the ontology at all times. The presentist, Arthur Breyer here, he's going to take 10 seriously. He's going to say, no, the world's three-dimensional. If you remember a dynamic thing, right? They're basically denying that. So saying there's any equivocation is saying just presentism is false. That's not an argument. So finally, what is the upshot of this? This doesn't only work for past, future, present, all that. It works for anything in or outside your ontology. Present object, Celtic, my favorite football club here. They presently exist, so you can get truth. You can get truth about the world, past, present, future, yeah. Truth about reality, is it our ontology? Yep, it presently exists. So what kind of truth is it? Existential, objective. The past, like of the dog, right? True, it's worldly, but it's not in our ontology because it's past. So it's a past existential, but it's still objective. Celtic winning the cup, hopefully that happens today. True. Worldly, maybe, who knows if that's in the future. About reality, no, hasn't happened yet. Future existential. Now this is the juicy stuff. Fictional objects, true. Worldly, definitely not. Reality, definitely not. So what kind of truth? Well, maybe an intercontextual truth, This happens in scene 1, act 1. That's true. Or conceptual truths, this guy is a man. Yeah, he's defined as a man in the book. Modality, abstracta, mass, all this philosophical nonsense. Maybe it's worldly, maybe it's real. Who knows? But we will be able to get truth out of it somehow. That's the conclusion. Presentism is fine without introducing any of this extravagance, ontologically or ideologically, because we can cheat by taking tense seriously. And this cheating, by grounding truth in aboutness, allows us to make sense of all sorts of unreal things, fictional objects, the past, the future, without having any issue. Brilliant. Thank you so much.